So, Walid, please let us know when we're live so we can begin. Okay, we're done. Which means 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this big wide world. We're live at March Wenlock at the Get Award in Edgeways Festival, here with our beloved artistic director, Mike Rust. And we have with us today Janet Dowling, who is going to talk to us about her wonderful book. You can see it in the background, the wonderful background that is Janet, of her book, Folk Tales from the Cosmos. But before you start talking about your book and your research, Janet, which I'm sure is going to be very, very interesting for anyone watching, I'd like to tell you that there are people here who came for you. So if we have questions at the end of the interview, we might want to leave 5-10 minutes in the end so that you can interact with the people who are here. Yeah?
Lovely.
Okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So please, I have the book, but I'll pretend I know nothing about it. Please tell us about your book.
Hello. Hi, yes. Well, this is Folk Tales of the Cosmos. Here is the copy of the book. As you can see, the background's behind me. This is a collection of folk tales, as you well know, Desmina. A lot of up in the night sky, there are 88 official constellations, and 48 of them are based on the Greek myths. And certainly when I started looking into the stars and stories about the stars, I didn't quite appreciate how many of the Greek myths were up there. And in fact, they linked up. So you could have 8 or 9 or 10 constellations which linked into one great myth. And I thought, people should know this. People should know that up in the sky, there are legends, there are stories. And so I started working, looking at those stories and realizing that people like Patrick Moore had already done a book, Legends of the Stars. But what he did was he just listed the constellations at the beginning of each chapter, then told the story, and then that was it. And I had actually read these and I hadn't clicked where which stars, which bits of the story were actually constellations. So what I wanted to do as part of the book was to actually, as you go through the story, say, and this is the constellation such and such. Now, on one, that breaks the story up a bit. But on the other hand, I thought, well, if I didn't notice when I was going through reading the stories from Patrick Moore, then it was so important to me to make people realize there are stories up there. So and a lot of the guidebooks to the stars, they only do the little bit of the constellations. So so for example, there's Corvus, which is the crow, and you only get the little bit that's to do with him, and actually you don't get the rest of the legend, so you have no idea that his bit actually relates to 3 other constellations in the night sky. So I wanted to bring them all together and do that. But the other side of what I wanted to do is I was very aware, of course, that this is just the Greeks' perception of what's up in the night sky. And just because you're looking at something like Orion's Belt or the Pleiades or the Great Bear, which are distinctive shapes and distinctive asterisms. An asterism is a small cluster of stars within a bigger constellation, for those who aren't familiar. Other cultures have interpreted those asterisms in completely different ways. And so that's, for me, was the other important part of what I wanted to do, was actually to bring to people's attention, actually, there are a lot more stories out there. Same stars, different stories from different cultures.
Which brings me to my question, Janet, because we are lucky to have had scribes who have saved the ancient documents. So we have books and papyruses we can go through. And nowadays, of course, it's technology that is our tool for research. So Please tell us a little bit. How did you go about your research? That's so interesting.
Um, as you say, a lot of it is done online, on and searching out, but it's not always easy, because you have to use the right words. So, I mean, I have purchased a lot of books, and these ones that people have written, either collecting star stories themselves, or people who have written great tomes about star stories from different countries and different historical periods. So partly it's been going through those and looking at what they've written and then picking them out. Because if you know something's there to go and look for, it's a damn sight easier. Sorry for swearing this early in the morning. It's a damn, oh, I did it again. It's very much easier than just trying to think what kind of thing might be out there. If you know to look for a particular myth, like with a crow in it, then it's easier to find.
On the other hand, stories so old, we're talking about millennia. If you go looking through one constellation, you might find certainly different versions of a story, but
Yeah.
also different stories on the same stars, right?
Yes, yes. And certainly even with the Greek tales, you know, some of the stars, like even the Great Bears, there are two different versions of what stories they might be told about the two Great Bears. And most people only know the one story, which is the Callisto story, and don't know the other story, which is the bears that nurtured Zeus when he was in hiding from his father Kronos, when Kronos was trying to was good at all his children because he didn't want to be overthrown, just as he'd overthrown his father. Um, but so a lot of that, I did actually ask out for because of course part of this was during COVID, and I was attending groups across the world really, and I would always ask in those groups if any people knew of any local stories or stories from within their own cultures, and some people were very helpful and shared with me some stories or could point me towards a source which I hadn't otherwise considered. So
You also took stories from the oral tradition then, right? Not only from written sources.
well, from what people told from within their own cultures, yes.
Mhm. Mm.
Um, but you know, there are some like and that's one of the issues is I was very careful about, and in fact it's what I spend a lot of time in introduction, is the whole issue about a cultural appropriation. Because one of the things I was very aware of that a lots of writing about the Aboriginal stories of Australia talked about the story but didn't actually tell the story. And I know there's a big issue in Australia about um, concerns about the way stories have been taken and used and no attribution being given.
Even if you do give attribution, some people are very protective of their stories, especially if they have been colonized, to my
Yeah.
experience, because I have had the same discussion with people that were Native Americans.
Yep.
And you know, you can hear a story and gladly want to retell it, but what you put in the story, the elements you put, will have nothing to do with the original story.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's a big issue.
It is a big issue, and I what I try to do is try to find as many versions of stories as I could do, and then just took them back to the absolute bare bones. So that because I was aware very early on, because I was well, some of the Australian myths are in, oh, I can't even remember his name, it's Reed, I think it is. And he'd done a lot, put a lot of those stories in there. I found other sources for them as well. And like, for example, there was a 19th century writer who when I was reading her introduction, I thought she understands, she's very sympathetic to the notion of being pure to the story. And so I took her as a guide rather than Reed. And so I took I took him as my basis for finding other versions.
I
And
see.
that's what I tried to do. But very early on, I was very much aware that I had taken a story, rewritten it, And then when I came back to look at it, I realized I put a lot of my personal values into the story.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I thought, can't do this, can't do this. And it was a good learning point right early on that I had to be very careful that, you know, I needed to put things into the story that was only there. And so that's why some of the stories in the book are very sparse, is because I've tried to be true to the tradition, because you don't know what you're incorporating in.
So what you're saying, if I'm getting this right, is that you try to avoid embellishing the story or putting morals, today's morals in them. Is that it?
Yes, yeah.
Mm.
But equally, there are some stories, like the Chinese stories, for which there are multiple versions all over the internet, all in kinds of books. And, you know, and you begin to, well, actually, it's not going to make any difference to anyone because there is obviously no one strand to follow here. And it was a question looking at all the different versions that I found, then pulling out the common bits together and then embellishing them in the normal way that you would do as a story. And so there is a mixture of stories which are true to the bones and stories which have been embellished. And that, I hope I've done that sensitively and with respect to the traditional cultures.
Nice, good. Yeah, I think you have. I think you have. Now, my question is, okay, the Greek myths, most of them are very popular, very well known to us in this part of the world, in Europe. What about the rest of the myths? Did you go traveling? How did you pick them up?
Well, because we were during COVID when I was doing most of the work, there wasn't even traveling down to my local library, let alone anything else. But for example, some of them came to me. I got a phone call one day. We have an international school in Sidmouth where the adults and children come for a 3-week intensive course to learn English. And they have local hosts, and one of those local hosts rang me up and she said, I've got a woman staying with me. She's from Belgium. Her English is pretty good, and she's a storyteller, and I wondered if you'd like to meet her. And I said, oh yes, that'd be fine, that'd be lovely. So I went round for the evening, and it turned out, yes, she was a Belgian storyteller, and it turned out we knew quite a lot of people in common anyway, which was surprising. And then I told her what I was doing in terms of the book. And she says, oh, I think I've got a story for you. She says, it comes from Latvia, but I heard it from, she's Belgium, so she'd learned it from a German storyteller who'd got it from a Latvian storyteller.
Wow.
And so she told me the story, and it was one I'd not heard before at all. And the title of it was the Vale of Immutatum, which, of course, with a title like that, if you're searching, you're never going to pick it up as anything to do with myths of the stars.
So it was a folk tale then?
Yes, and in fact, I did more research on it, found other versions of it, but they're all around Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. So from that part of the country, I think there's a Finnish version too. And again, because there were multiple versions of it, I again pulled the bones together and then developed the story, which I hope is not too far from the original, but there were so many versions of the original. So some stories actually did come to me.
I think those are the best ones, the ones that come to you voluntarily.
And I have to say that's the one I enjoy telling. If people want an example from the book, then
On
that's the
that
one I tell.
note, is that
Sorry?
the story you're going to share with us today?
Yes,
Is it your favorite one?
yes.
Awesome. In that case, I will pin myself out of the way and leave the floor to you. And Janet, give me a second, please. Remove pin. We are all ears.
Okay. I can only see you actually, Despina.
If you change the view on top of there is a little box that says view on top of the screen. You can put it into gallery view and you can,
Okay, gotcha.
or I can turn the
No, that's
it
fine.
around so you can look.
No, that's fine. No, let's get on with the story because
Yes.
I have to say this is probably a 10-minute story, so I'm going to tell it briefly. Otherwise, we won't have time for questions at the end. And I know David's coming on at 10:30. Okay, so hello everyone. Okay. Immutatum. Imutatin was one of the goddesses up in the night sky. She was responsible for the birds on the earth. She looked after them. She guided them. She showed them the way when they migrated north to south, made sure there was food for them on the way. And then when they chose round to come back again, she guided them back, made sure they got back to their homes safely, and again provided the food on the way. And she did this year in and year out, and she enjoyed the work so much, but sometimes she was a bit lonely. And she thought, I would like to have a companion. I think I'd like to have a husband. I wonder who might come calling. And then one day, up came a carriage. And the carriage was black, and it was drawn by 4 black horses. And somebody stood out from the horse. And she looked at him and thought, oh, he looks very interesting. And he came up to her and he bowed before her and he said, I am the North Star, the pole star. And I have come to court you to see if we could perhaps think of a union. And she looked at him kindly and she said, I'm very sorry, but if you are the pole star, then you stay there in one place all the time. Nothing moves around you. You are there, the center of attention. And I cannot do that. I am a free spirit and I would have to move. I'm sorry, I cannot marry you. And with that, he bowed and got back into his coach and horses, and they drove away. And she wondered if she would ever find a companion, a husband. And then up came another coach. This time it was a coach that was absolutely white. And there was 20 horses, 20 white horses. And out came a stunningly beautiful young man. And he came and bowed and he said, I'm come seeking a wife and wondered if you and I might be compatible. I am the moon and I wish to court you. And she looked at him and she said, I'm sorry, but you, the moon, you change every day. I would never know who it is I am talking to. I would never know who I'm a companion with. No, I don't think I could possibly marry you. And he bowed and he turned and went back into his coach and went away. And then a third coach came, and this was gold and shining, and the horses, there were 30 of them, and they glimmered, and it was like they had flecks of gold on their manes. And a young man came out, and oh my word, he was absolutely gorgeous. And he came up to her and he bowed and he said, I am the sun and I wish to court you. It has to be companions in life. And she looked at him and she said, I'm sorry, but you rise up every morning, go across the sky, back down again. And you do that every single day. Sometimes you're a bit higher and sometimes you're a bit lower, but you go the same way every day. And I'm sorry, I cannot do that. I cannot be rigid, just fixed up, going in one direction only. Even though you're moving, even though you're traveling, that's not a life for me. And so the son nodded and got back into his coach and they rode off. And for a long time, as much as she loved the birds, north to south and south to north, caring for them, looking after them, showing them way, she still felt lonely. And then came the day when a coach arrived. And this coach, well, it was difficult to see what colour it was because it was flashing reds and greens and purples. Oh, and it had 100 horses. Oh my goodness. And out stepped, well, this was a man who was beyond fabulousness. And he came up to her and he bowed and he says, I am the Northern Lights and I have come to court you. And she looked at him, and she looked at the way he moved and the way he shook himself. And she said, oh, yes, you move around the northern sky. You move around the lights. You move so the sky shimmers with you of everything that you do. You do not stay in one place. Oh, yes, I think you are the person for me to be my companion. And so they plighted their troth and promised to get married. And they would get married in the next spring. And so he went away and waved to her, and she waved back, thinking and dreaming of the day that he would come. And as a gift, he gave her a huge box of diamonds, crystals, which had come from the Northern Lights. And she took those crystals, diamonds, and she made herself a wedding dress, and she made herself a veil, and in her veil, she placed all of these diamonds. And with all of these diamonds, oh, even her father commented how beautiful that she looked. And when the spring came, she waited for her lover to come to her, waited for the man who would be her companion to life. She waited. And spring went into summer, summer went into autumn, and then into winter, and then it was spring again. And by this time, she was a wreck. She could hardly do anything at all. She longed for him. She felt rejected by him. She didn't know what to do. And the birds, she neglected the birds. She no longer showed them the way. She no longer made sure there was food for them. They were suffering. They were losing their way. And they appealed to her father, please. And he turned and he was shocked. He had not realized how much his daughter was suffering. And so he picked her up and he said, my daughter, you must move away from this. I'm going to place you in the night sky. From there, you can show the birds. And she was up there, pinned to the sky, and he took her veil. And her veil now is what we see as the Milky Way. And it's the Milky Way that guides the birds while they go up, backwards and forwards. But from up there in the sky, as she looks down, she realizes now that the Northern Lights, what she liked about him was the very reason why he could never be her companion. Because the Northern Lights, they change all the time. They're never in the same place twice. But now she can watch the moon. She can watch the Northern Star. She can watch the sun and the Northern Lights. And in a way, she's not so lonely because she has all their company. And the birds sing out to her because she is restored and she looks after them. Thank you.
People were clapping a lot here while I was muted, but you should know. To be honest, Janet, I think that might have been my favorite story from your book also, which is sad but lovely. And of course, it explains why these constellations are still cannot be found, cannot find each other in the night sky. Let me just admit 2 more people. Okay, good. Awesome. So, are there questions for Janet? Would you like some interaction?
Are there any stories that...
Let me turn to you.
Janet, it's Kat.
Hi, Kath.
I was just wondering, there was something on the news today about a comet that's
Yeah.
around for the next month or so. I can't remember whether they said it was every 80,000 years or 800,000 years. It's comet. I just wondered if there were any stories about comets. Because they would be quite, you know, they're not permanent things in the sky, are they?
There are none in the book. Comets, because they come so rarely, like that one, it comes every 80,000 years. So the previous people to have seen it would have been the Neanderthals. So we have no stories from the Neanderthals. But some, you know, Halley's Comet is the one that comes most frequently, and that's 76 years, I think, is the cycle on that. And so there are stories about Halley's Comet, but that's mainly about how it brings you doom and gloom, rather than an origin story of how it exists.
Janet, there might have been some Neanderthal stories about that comet.
I'm sure there were. And the point is, there will be stories from when we've seen this comet this time.
Indeed, indeed.
And the other thing, did you spend much time yourself looking at the night sky?
I'm a member of the Norman Lockyer Observatory, which is half a mile down the road from where I live. So I spend every Friday evening there, and we have lots of open days and open evenings. So I'm there and I'm talking with people about the night sky. And occasionally, they let me tell stories under the night sky and in a planetarium.
What do you mean occasionally they let you? They should have been asking for it every time. That's really weird. Anybody has a question?
Yes, I have. Hi, Janet, Jean here. Are there any particular stories you left out and why, if there were?
Yes, there were stories like some of them, the ones that come to mind immediately were Australian Aboriginal, and there was one basically about the moon and the sun, and when they're up in the sky, obviously the sun is going first forward, and then the moon comes after, and the sun got very annoyed because when they disappear into an underground cavern, and the sun was annoyed that the moon was forever following, and so in the underground cavern it waited, and when the moon followed in, I'm afraid it is sorted, and it was, you know, the sun was the male, the moon was the female, and you know, when they came out, and when the moon comes out, the marks that you see on the moon's face are the bruises.
Oh,
Yeah.
And you know, and you know, and you know, and the end of the story, as in the source that I found it, saying, and you know, and thus women began to learn their place, that they are second to the man.
Sorry,
I thought,
we have 2 minutes left, and there is another lady who would like to ask you a question, if that's all right.
that's fine. But
Awesome.
that kind of story I didn't include.
Yeah, yeah, we cannot see why.
Hello.
Hi, Maggie. Thank you very much for your story. I enjoyed it. I particularly like the Milky Way element of it. That was but there was one thing I wanted to mention about, you were saying about cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
I had a talk with Debbie Thomason
Yeah.
at the festival. She had a very interesting take on that, in that someone asked her, is it all right to tell those stories? And she gave a very interesting response. She said, acknowledge the source, but what did that story awaken in you? And what can you bring to that story?
That's the question.
Which was, I thought, was a very interesting take on that.
Yeah.
On that question. So that you aren't just repeating a story, you are internalizing it, you are seeing how it affects you, and you may put your own interpretation on it, but
Let's give her a minute to
Yeah.
answer because we're out of time.
Okay, very quickly, Dovey was one of the I spoke to several traditional bearers in the course of doing this the story, and I have to say that sounds like she's moved on from when the last time I've spoken to her, because she, as with other tradition bearers, were basically saying, first of all, if it's not your culture, don't tell the story, but if you're going to tell it with respect, and make sure you research it so that you understand it. And if you look at the equity guidelines for storytellers on cultural appropriation, that's essentially what they say too. So that's my banner that I go with. If I think it's important enough for me to include it, then, you know, research it and respect it.
You've got two great answers now. Okay, so I think our time is over, my dear. I'm very glad I had you here today. And what an interesting conversation we've had. People should get that book. I guarantee it's good.
Thank you very much. It was really delightful to be here.
Absolutely. So enjoy the rest of your day. I hope we'll see you later on at 11 at the story round, if you're around.
Yes, yes, I'll be here until 12 o'clock. So I'm staying for David as well.
Great. Maybe we get another story then. Awesome. See you later.
Cheers.
So let me see. Gallery. Okay. And good morning, Dima. How are you? Move in. Very good.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have David here yet, so let's give him a minute. Maybe he's trying to connect. So Dima, tell us a little bit. You come from Gaza. Tell us a little bit about you. And you're in Egypt now, is that right?
What?
I have a good friend of yours you might remember from your earlier tellings. Look at this guy here.
Yeah, I do
Hi,
remember.
how are you? Where are you?
Now I'm in Egypt, Cairo.
Oh, right, in Egypt. Oh,
What?
great, you got out there.
Yeah,
Are there lots of people from Gaza in Cairo there?
yeah, so many. We had to leave Gaza
Hi,
because
Haneen. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. How are you, Despina?
We're delighted to have you. I'm
Thank
very
you.
well. I'm still waiting for David. Simona says it's lovely to see you again, Dima.
oh, thank you.
And while we're waiting for David, Haneen, since it's your story, your project, and David, would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. So since October 2023 and the events which have been unfolded in Gaza, so David started to kind of reshare the stories that have been told by young people in Gaza and the World Storytelling Cafe since 2021. So he was sharing a story every day. And I think on the New Year Eve, I was staying with David and Tammy, and then David started talking about his interest in creating a kind of professional safe space for other people as well to retell the young people's from Gaza stories. Here's he. Yeah. Hi, David.
Good morning.
Hello, Despina. Hello, Haneen. I'm really sorry. I've got connection problems here in Cornwall,
Don't
and I've
worry,
been getting
don't worry.
I've been
Good,
getting
Dima.
a little bit anxious for the last couple of minutes, but I'm here now.
It's okay, good. It's good to have you. Dima is here, and Haneen was
Oh,
telling
hello.
us about your project.
Hi, Dima. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
There are people
So-
here at the fire station. You cannot see them right now, but there are people here around me who are all listening to you. And I'm sure we have many people listening on Zoom because we're on Facebook Live and we're on YouTube. And so hopefully lots of people will become aware of what's happening. So, Haneen, would you like to carry on what you were saying, or would you like David to take over?
I'll just carry on the sentence I was kind of
Yes,
talking
please
about.
do.
So David has got this idea of inviting people from all around the world, whether they are storytellers, teachers, educators, or other people who are interested in retelling the children's from Gaza stories. And the project was launched in January 2024. And we made an invitation to everybody who's interested in retelling the stories which have been told from the students' homes back during the pandemic in 2021. And I think lots of people have shown interest, and lots of people have already retold the stories, and I will hand over to David to talk about this a little bit. So over to you, David.
Oh, thank you, Haneen. Exactly. So Haneen was staying with me and Tammy, and on the 1st of January, we launched Tell a Child in Gaza's Tale. So here you can see a photograph of some of the children who shared stories at the World Storytelling Cafe. Hello, World Storytelling Cafe. And there's the links to the project. And if you're watching a recording of this later, you can pause and you can click on those QR codes to get the links to the project. So those are the videos of children telling the stories, and also the videos of people around the world retelling the stories, including you, Despina, and many other people here in the, and Simona, and many other people here who are listening or listening around the world or watching the recordings. Thank you to all of you. John Rowe, of course, who without John Rowe, this project would never have happened, because back in 2020, John Rowe came up with the idea of young international storytellers, and I said yes, and we together encourage children. And as Haneen, just following from what Haneen said, most of the children from around the world who came during the pandemic to the World Storytelling Cafe were from Gaza. Hundreds of stories were shared by children from Gaza who wanted to reach out to the world with their beautiful hearts and stories, including a young woman called Dima. And this is Dima in 2021, a visit to the World Storytelling Cafe. Her teacher, Haneen, said, "Why don't you come and tell a story at the World Storytelling Cafe?" And Dima chose this story of the white elephant and came and shared it. And it was so beautiful. You can go back and watch that. And well, after Dima tells the story of the white elephant, I will give some context. I will explain about who else has told this story since and how people can get involved in the project.
That would be awesome. But before you do that, David, I have John Rowe here with me, next to me. I would like to say a few words on behalf of the World Storytelling Cafe.
Well, I feel like something of a fake, David. We just put on the platform. I found you by a circuitous route through another project, and they said I needed to speak to you. And we did quite a lot with Gaza, but the most moving time was before, none of the children came up, but it was during an earlier bombing, and a teacher came up, and I can't remember which teacher, but apologized that there were no children there, but the bombs were falling and all the windows were going in the school, and I could hear it, and it just put the whole thing in context for me and how important the project was, which you've run with. I can take very little credit. You've run with that.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that, Johnny. I remember that moment. The teacher was Ruba. And what's been happening over the last year is obviously appalling. And even though most of the stories that I've shared as part of Tell a Child in Gaza's Tales are recordings from the archives of the World Storytelling Cafe, several stories have come from Gaza since. So like that time, during the bombing, during the most appalling circumstances of genocide, children have been coming in and telling stories. Not live. Well, there is an exception, as you know, John. That's Hala Muntasalem and her sister Shafta came in live and shared stories with us, which is extraordinary. But other stories came in that have been recorded by children under bombing, with drones buzzing above their heads, and they had the courage and the hospitality to share stories from their where they were. I was going to say from their homes in Gaza, but they're temporary homes. They're displaced places of residence, sometimes from corridors or rooftops.
And can I
So
just-
yeah, it's a huge tribute to these children.
This is very rarely mentioned when we're talking about the bombing on Sumter. We're not talking about since October last year. We're talking about what was happening the year before. So the whole thing doesn't start in October, and I think people really need to get that into their heads.
Well, I do know that the kids whose stories we reshare, the stories we hear from the kids tell and we retell them, feel comforted by this. So your project is doing them good in so many ways. Plus, while we're at it, I will be putting links in the chat so that people who want to donate or help in any way, financially or in any other way, even by retelling a story, can do that, can be part of your project. So if you would
If people would like to make a donation today, their donation will go directly to Dima's family fundraiser. So Dima is one of many, many young people who are displaced, who were forced by circumstances. They've fled from Gaza to safety, and Dima is in Egypt. And we might think that's a safe place, but it's a very difficult place to be, because there's no education provided by the Egyptian authorities. There's no possibility for her family members to have employment in Egypt. So they had to borrow a lot of money to get out of Gaza. So here is Dima's fundraiser, and there is the QR code. If people are watching this later, you can hold up your phones. And any money that you give today, I would suggest that goes to Dima's family fundraiser.
Thank you.
But can I go back to talking briefly about what? I've actually lost my thread of thought. What was I
You
going
were
to say?
just ready to give the stage to Dima, I believe, when
I was Despina, but just following what you said, comforting the hearts of children in Gaza, yes, and teachers. I'm in contact with many teachers in Gaza. I've lost contact with some. And the children whose stories we're sharing, Haneen, we talked about this. Most of the children, we don't know their circumstances. We don't know if you're still alive. But even if you're not, we are sharing your stories to honor you and to celebrate your culture, your choices. So, Haneen, would you like to introduce Dima?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So Dima is one of my students. She was one of my students during her time at prep school back in Gaza in 2020 and 2021. She was one of the most creative students that I have ever taught. She was an active drama club member. She's interested in storytelling techniques, and she loves telling stories to little kids as well as people from all around the world. Dima has told the White Elephant story back in 2021. She chose the story. She came confidently. She spoke to people in the room, an international global community for the first time. And she was very proud and confident, showing her choice and showing the hospitality from her home in Gaza. Very generous to share this story. Dima has been evacuated to Egypt, as David said, in last April. And she's now in Egypt. She's kind of doing online education with the Ministry of Education in the West Bank. And I will hand over to Dima now to introduce herself a little bit and tell us the story. Over to you, Dima.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Dima. I want to thank Mrs. Haneen for what she said. She said very beautiful words. She expressed me in a very beautiful way. And I want to say something about the last part David talked about, retelling the story of the children's. I want to say my experience when I knew that my story have been retold. My circumstances wasn't that good. My life wasn't that good. Everything was super bad. I had some loss and I was just so tired and not in a good mood. But when Mrs. Haneen sent me the video of the lady retelling my story, I was super happy, and just it was a very beautiful moment, and it changed my mood for days, knowing that someone retold my story and someone cares about me and someone really cares and interested in knowing what happened in Gaza and how people are really suffering there, and they show them that they are caring, and they hear about them every day, and there is people that support you. So either of these children are not alive and not with us today. I know that they are happy and they are super proud of themselves, and they are happy that for what people do for them and not being forgotten. Thank you all for caring and sharing about Gaza, because that's really means for us. It just blow us like from happiness when we know that people go out for us and shout with our names, and people are really caring about what happening in Gaza, and they just not forgetting that there's a genocide happening for people in Gaza. Thank you all. I will start my story. Okay. Once upon a time, there was elephants who could talk like a human being. The finest elephant was a white elephant, but his mother was old and poor. She couldn't see. She was blind. One day, the elephant suggested to his mother to go and live in a distant cave. The mother agreed. But what happened? Let's see. One day, the elephant heard a cries coming up from the forest. Help me! Help me! I'm lost! I'm lost! The elephant said to his mother, Mother, I want to go and help him. The mother said, No, my son! No, my son! Human beings are bad! Human beings are bad! Your goodness will be traded by tragedy. The elephant said to his mother, No, I will go and help the man. The elephant didn't hurt his mother, and he went to the forest. Once he arrived, the man saw the white elephant, and he shouted, Oh, I'm lost in a wood for the 7 days. I'm lost in a wood for 7 days. The elephant said to the man, Don't worry, I'll help you. Don't worry, just climb on my back, and I will arrive you to your home safety. The man said, Really? The elephant said, Yes, don't worry, just climb on my back. The elephant carried the man to his home safety, but the man was greedy. He knew when he left that the king lost his favorite animal. So he went to the king and said, Your Majesty, I find a very beautiful white elephant, and he can also talk. The king replied, Really? The man said, Yes, Your Majesty, but I just need your permission and some trainers so we can capture the elephant. The king said, You have my permission. You have trainers. Go and get the elephant. They went and they captured the elephant. After a few days, one of the trainers came to the king and said, Your Majesty, the white elephant refused to eat, and he also very sick. The king, What? Then he went to see the white elephant. When he saw him, he asked him, Why? Why are you not eating? Why are you not eating? The white elephant replied, How can
I'm afraid we lost Dima mid-story. Oh, you're back, Dima. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so
When I
we're-
stop,
okay, so we're
when I have lost the connection or something.
You're
Yes.
right at the end of the story, Dima, just when the white elephant's mother and he comes home to his mother.
Okay. Shall I continue?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
carry.
I'm sorry about the connection. It's not good here in Egypt. Okay. Then the white elephant ran crashing into the trees of the forest, and he arrived to his mother. He have saw her. She was tired, but she was alive. Then he said, I miss you, mother. I missed you, mother. And the mother replied, I miss you too, my son. I miss you too, my son. Then the white elephant told his mother what happened with him. The mother said, I told you, my son. I told you. Your goodness will be traded by tragedy. The white elephant said to his mother, let's just don't care about the man and focus on the king goodness. Oh, thank you for listening. I don't know what happened to the camera.
Oh, you know what, Dima? That was absolutely beautiful. We could hear every
Everybody's
word so
clapping
clearly.
here. All around, the people are clapping, Dima, for your story.
Thank you.
It's such an incredible story for you to
Yeah.
choose.
Yeah, it's very good.
Why did you choose this story, Dima?
It's very good story actually. I think because of the white elephant, how he just saw the goodness in people and he didn't say so the bad. He just was super happy all the not happy, let's say super blooming and he saw everything with goodness and how he helped the man and how the king was good. Like even like we just want to say something that not all people are the same, even if we are sharing the same culture or sharing the same nationality. That doesn't mean one person is bad. That mean everyone is bad. Like how was the king is good, but the man wasn't good. So that's what the elephant so he didn't so that like, oh my God, all human beings are bad or human beings are traitors. He saw that there's some human beings that are good and kind, like the king, and he didn't focus on the bad side. He focused on the good side, which is something I really like to see in my life. I never focus on the bad of the person. I focus on the good on the person, like how much kind he is. I will treat him with good, like how he give me some kindness. And also one thing that's how helpful the white elephant was. Then his goodness and his kindness also retreated to him with also a goodness from the king and kindness. Like you never regret in doing good things, because no matter how much you lived, your goodness will come back for you. And one day you remember, like, I did some good things for people, and here I am like taking goodness from people, like how I give. Just want to mention another thing about this story, because it's remind me of something that happened with us in 2014. There was a war. Some people were displaced from their homes. At that time, our home was safe and like this, and we opened our house for the people, and they lived in our house till the war was ended. In 2024, we also forced to leave our houses and being displaced. We also had some people to open their houses for us and give us a safe place. Yeah, maybe there's no safe place or safe zone in Gaza, but still some people opened their houses for us. And that day, my mother died. I think that because of the goodness I give it for the people in 2014, now I'm returning the goodness with people are good to have us in their homes. And yeah, that's why it's remind me of that things, and the story is really like.
Very wise.
Dima, you
have a very wise mother, Dima.
Yeah,
Dima, you express yourself so well. Everybody has lost their neighbours. Many neighbours are no longer with you in Gaza, but neighbours are everything, aren't they? In your culture, in many cultures around the world. There's a beautiful story that reminds me of, actually. There's another child called Maram told. But what I wanted to say, Dima, is your story about goodness is typical. So many of the stories, or nearly all of the stories, I would say, that children from Gaza have shared are stories about justice and peace and equity. And I just love the messages in the stories for humankind. They're deeply human stories. Some of the stories are being created by the children. Some of the stories are traditional stories, like the one you told. Some are regional stories that are specific to Palestine, from your heritage. And some stories are historical or personal stories. There's a whole array of stories. Haneen has taken some of the personal stories and included them in her project, Voices Across Worlds, with the British Council. And I'm hoping to publish some of the stories that are folk tales shortly. So if anybody listening in would like to share any ideas for publication with me, we're Haneen and I, whose project it is, we're open to listening to your ideas. Can I also say that the woman who retold your story, Dima, when you were still in Gaza was Jackie Ross, a fantastic storyteller from Scotland. And Jackie was the first person to retell your story.
I'm sorry, I just
And-
forgot.
And
But
and
I
many
did video.
and many others have retold your story, The White Elephant, including me. I told The White Elephant in the Netherlands, in a school. I told it in Germany, in different schools, in Hamburg and in Wolfenbüttel in Lower Saxony. I've also told The White Elephant last Friday in a primary school near my home in Exeter. I told it twice to children aged 10 and 11. And every time I showed them a photograph of you telling the story and said, I learned this story from Dima, who's from Gaza. Please pass on the story. And the children all said, yes, tonight we're going to tell this story to our families. So this is what storytelling is. It's passing on this wonderful wisdom through our stories. Can we go back to Haneen for a comment about Dima's storytelling? Because Haneen is Dima's teacher.
Before you hand it back to Haneen, I should tell you, Dima, that there are 7 people in the room that say hello, and all are under the obligation of retelling The White Elephant now.
Hello, everyone.
Okay,
Haneen.
it's up to you.
Thank you, David and Despina. I would like to comment on the importance of that particular invitation of retelling the children's stories for the teachers in Palestine, but also to young people in Palestine. So in particular, for young people who are placed in a very unsafe context, very unsettled context, they always feel that kind of inconsistency and the unknown reality they live in. Back in 2021, they were living under the blockade, and they are. And that was quite interesting to be invited to a global community where they are part of a global gathering, and they are invited to tell a story. That was significant on so many levels, because if they feel abandoned by the world, or if they feel that they are not part of that global community, that sort of invitation kind of reassured them that their choices matter, their identities are cherished, and the concept of care, which was shown in the World Storytelling Cafe, that kind of artistic listening to the children's stories with so much passion and so much compassion, and giving them the attention they deserve, and see the brighter side of their humanity, see them as rounded human beings with interests, with desires, with dreams, whether they are telling folk tales, which I think is a very important part of their culture, of their cherishing their grandparents and where they come from. And this is very important in a place like Gaza, when culture is being eliminated, and when young people are targeted, and when education is destroyed. It's very important to listen to the stories coming from there. It's very important to celebrate the culture and the identity, and not to try to kind of melt it in the whole world. It's also important now more than ever to kind of raise awareness and just see how much creative are the teachers and the young people from Gaza are. And one of the most highly educated places in the world, and this is not bias, but education is highly valued because it's their only way to create a change, to show their creativity, to tell their stories, to tell the world about themselves. Now, the children have been deprived from going to schools for more than a year. They have lived in absolutely appalling situation, but still are interested in some way or another in telling their stories, writing down their diaries. And as Dima said, it made all the difference for her. I remember the day when she arrived in Egypt, and I just messaged her after a long time to see how she is. And I sent the link for Jackie's telling, and she was absolutely pleased. Seeing that, she said, I felt forgotten by the world because there was a long period of blackout. They couldn't communicate, but also they just felt that sort of injustice being imposed on them. When they are in a time, they have to be really enjoying their lives, thinking about trips, thinking about travels, thinking about dreams and wishings. They have to strive and queue up for water and food every single day of their life. So it's very important to listen to the stories, and very, very important to acknowledge the work that is done behind the scenes from their teachers, because without the teachers, nothing would happen. And without the care of very good human beings, very kind people like yourselves, our voices wouldn't have been heard. So your stories, my lovely young learners in Palestine and colleagues, are not only being heard, but also felt and performed very deeply and retold and passed on. And we will keep doing that. We will keep listening to the voices. We will keep cherishing their identities. We will keep putting ourselves on the right side of the history as educators. And this time will pass, and Palestinians will come back to the world as academics, doctors, nurses, beautiful storytellers, to be pioneers. That's what I believe in. That's what they deserve. Thank you very much for having us today.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, David and Hanin, for your wonderful project. I hope more people get involved and do tell the stories, because there's so, the theme of this year's festival here at Get the Word in Edgeways is healing under the stars. And keeping in mind that we all live under the same sky, under the same stars, we can only pray for healing. So thank you, Dima, for the story. Thank you, David and Hanin, for presenting your project.
Despina, can I just say one final thing? I know time is short, but there is something important that I want to say.
Please.
And that is, we can continue doing this. And this evening, I'm going to be doing a fundraiser here in Falmouth, where I'm visiting, with Gary Cordingley, who's kindly agreed to host the evening. Is also going to share a Palestinian tale. Gary Cordingley is known to all of you at the World Storytelling Cafe and Get a Word in Edgeways. And this evening, the fundraiser will be for Hala Muntasalem and her sister Shatha and their family. And we all know Hala at the World Storytelling Cafe. And Hala is still in Gaza and is going through really impossible situation, as we've talked about. And then on the 28th of October at the Scottish International Storytelling Festival, Haneen and I and Dima and Jackie Ross are together doing an event, Tell a Child in Gaza's Tale, and it's a longer event. So today this is just a half hour, but if you're interested in finding out much more about the project and all the possibilities and hearing many different stories and retellings from around the world, from Greece, from Cuba, then come along on the 28th. It's a free event and it's online at the Global Lab. It's free and it's 2 hours in depth, and it's maybe 2.5 hours in depth at 2 o'clock in the afternoon UK time on the 28th of October. So Haneen, you put it so beautifully, and Dima, thank you so much for representing the children of Gaza.
Great. So all links are in the chat now. Links for donating to the children in Gaza in general, a link for Dima, and a link for Hala. So anybody who wants to, chip in any way they can, they are free to do that now. I have put both links in the Facebook Live, David. So if you could add Hala's link there, that would be awesome. Because now we have to carry on. And
What I'm doing is each event I'm doing, I'm raising money for a different child. This event is for Dima. This event is for Dima's family.
Great. Awesome. Okay, thank you very much for being here with us and for the work you're doing.
Thank you. It's great. Thanks very much.
Anyone who wants to stay, you're free to stay. We're going to carry on with the story round now, continuing with stories of healing under the stars. So it can be stories about healing, like Dima's was, it can be stories about stars, or it can be a combination, or it can be any story really, but that is the general theme. So from the people who are here, how many of you are going to share a story? Okay, 2.
Despina, can I ask one thing? Despina, I have to leave in a moment, but before I leave, I haven't had a chance to tell a story. Could I start off with a
Absolutely. Yes,
story?
please go first, David.
Well, I mentioned Hala, but I also mentioned Maram, and Maram told many stories at the World Storytelling Cafe. And I'm going to tell one of my favorite stories. She told it with puppets that she made herself. And Haneen and Dima talked about neighbors. And even people who've lost their neighbors, they're finding new neighbors who bring them in. And I think this fits with the theme of this story. So it's a very, very short story. It's an Arabic saying, the neighbor is before the house. Kenya Makan Fikadim Zaman, there were once 2 neighbors, Abu Khalid and Abu Hassan. And Abu Khalid was in trouble. He had lost all his money. He was in debt. And what could he do? He put a sign outside his house saying that it was for sale. 1,000 dinar. The people looked at this sign and thought, this house is not worth 1,000 dinar. His good neighbor, Abu Hassan, came to Abu Khalid and said, my neighbor, you can't possibly sell this house for 500, for 1,000 dinar. It's worth at most 500 dinar. And Abu Khalid looked at Abu Hassan and said, oh, my neighbor, my friend, 500 dinar is for the house, but the rest is for having such wonderful neighbors as you. And when Abu Hassan heard these words, he paid off his neighbor's debt. And Abu Khalid and Abu Hassan continued as best neighbors and as best friends. And this story gives rise to the Arabic proverb that's popular in Gaza and Palestine. The neighbor is before the house.
Wow.
For all of the neighbors in Palestine, and I hope that Maram, wherever you are, that you are safe.
Thank you, David, for the lovely story. Let us all hope that Mara is well. Great, so let's take turns, use one person from the Zoom and then one person live. What do you think? So who wants to, would you like to start, John, since you're here?
Yeah, I knew which story I was going to tell when I walked in, but I sometimes tell the story of Hala, but I won't do that. I'll do that in another story then. It's one like David, I'll tell wherever.
Okay.
But this is a bit of cultural appropriation. Because I have no embarrassment about I run counter. I
can hear you, John. Address the Zoom audience, please.
Oh, sorry. I forget. I've been running Zoom for 3 years. I should know.
It's okay.
Okay. And obviously that wasn't me. And so that's all right. Got my head. So I pick up stories wherever I go, and buy these little pamphlets with local stories and so forth. And I spent a bit of time in Lapland in Finland, and so picked up a Sami story, and I think it resonates now because of the because we got the Northern Lights a few nights ago, and so this is the Northern Lights story. That's how to select your Northern.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just let me
So-
fix this for you.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
No, I think our culture, the English culture, is based on cultural appropriation and not through colonialism. If you look at in Merchant of Venice, Portia's speech when she describes the suitors, describes the English suitor as having his hose from Italy, his doublet from somewhere else, and something. And there's just a whole thing about how the English suitor just picks up stuff from wherever he goes, because we're a little island, and like we poodle all over the
But that
place.
is not the story, is it?
That is not the story.
Give us the story, please.
I'll give okay. Right, so I was in Lapland and I picked up this story. And there was I'm being smacked again. The sun had a son, and we will call it Sun Boy. And the moon had a daughter, and we will call her Moonka. And she was beautiful. She had hair, silver, and skin the color of cloudberry. And the sun thought, that will be a bride for my son. So he said to me, boy, go and bring Moon Girl and you will be married. Now, he obeyed his father. He wasn't sure because he didn't really want Dad to pick his bride, but when he got there, then I should keep talking to the screen. When he got there, there was she was fantastic, and he felt instantly in love, and he took off his golden slippers and gave them to her, and she took them. She threw them back at him. Said, get out. Well, the moon, realizing that her daughter was now in danger, they upset the sun, took her and hid her, found a little island and hid her in a goti, a kotta, a teepee. And there she was safe. The reindeer skin across the entrance so the light couldn't get out. But one day, skipping across the night sky, came Northern Lights and his brothers. And he looked down and he saw the goti. And he said, if you are older than me, He sensed there was a woman in there. If you're older than me, you are my mother. If you're the same age as me, you are my sister. If you're younger than me, you will be my bride. Now he had a playful voice, and she just, it was one of those voices where you think, he may be a lot of fun. And so she invited him in, and they did fall in love, and it was, and they were happy, but every night he went out. You know, the trouble with playful boys is they will go out and play. And so every night he would go out and skip across the sky with his brothers. So one day when he was out, she wove a blanket with stars, full of stars. So when he woke up the next day, he was looking up and he thought he was already in the night sky. Because the boys might be playful, but the women are wise. So and they lived happily for years and years, and the celestial years, so it could be a century, it could be a millennium, I haven't the faintest idea. Until one day, Northern Lights had just gone out for a walk, not across the sky, but just out, and he'd left the flap open, the top of the goatee. And as the bear was dragging the moon across the night sky and the sun was rising, there was the light streaming out. The sun went down and he grabbed Moon Girl. He dragged her out. Well, Northern Lights saw this and started trying to save Moon Girl, but to no avail, and then and he was thrown off. The sun called his son to him. The sun boy came. The Moon Girl said, "I hate you. I will never marry you." And sent him away. And the sun let go of Moon Girl. And she ran back to her mother. And there she sits in the moon. And occasionally, Northern Lights appears like it did the other day, or the other night. And Northern Lights and Moon Girl look longingly at each other across the night sky. Ooh.
Destroy everything. Hey, lovely story about the Northern Lights. And I think that now, Janet, are you here, my love? Oh, you are here. If you can please turn your camera on. Great. Okay. So I'll mute myself so you can give us your story. And don't tell John that that story is in your book.
Which story? The one he just told or the one I'm telling? Because they're both in it.
Okay, awesome. We're all ears.
I should know that.
There you go.
Okay, I'll be very short with this one because other people want to tell. And so, this is a story from Vietnam. There was a young man called Chu Choi. And he was a lonely young man. He didn't really get on with other people and he didn't really know how to deal with that. And he would go for long walks in the forest, in the jungle. And as he was walking one day, he could hear a mewing. And he saw in front of him on the path a tiger cub. And as he got up to it, he could see that it was in desperate need. It was hardly breathing. And then, just as he was standing over it, the light went out in its eyes and it died. And he thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? What should I do? And then he could hear rustling. And he thought to himself, this is the mother. The mother's coming back. I better hide. She might think that I did this. And so he climbed the tree. And as the mother did come through, and she went up to her tiger cub and she nuzzled it. And then she gave a big cry. And then she went to the side of the pathway and looked through and then just bit off a small little plant. And she brought it back and then chewed it up and then dropped it into the mouth of her tiger cub. And then she nuzzled the child again. And within seconds, that little tiger cub was alive. And the two of them walked off down the path and then into the forest, the jungle. And Chu Choi was amazed. And he got down from the tree and he went to look to see where the tiger had been. And there he found the plant. It wasn't a very big plant, but it was just enough. And he looked around and he couldn't see anything. So he dug it up in his hands and he put it in his pocket. And he thought, I'll take this back and see what happens. But as he was walking back towards his village, he came across an old man who was sitting on a log. And the man was crying. And Choi Chu says, what's the matter? And the old man said, I'm so tired. I'm trying to get to see my son, for I fear I might die within days. But I am so tired. I fear I might die here and now. And Chu Choi said, well, I've got this plant. I don't know if this has been any good, but would you willing to try one of these leaves? And the old man says, I'll try anything. And he ate it. And within seconds, oh my goodness, he said, I feel so much better. I'll at least be able to get to my sons, and who knows, I might even have a few days more. And then he turned to Chu Choi and said to him, be careful with that plant. Look after it, respect it, give it clear water, never abuse it. And Chu Choi said, I would too, I bet. And the old man went on his way. Well, Chu Choi took the plant, the gift, back to his home and he planted it. And then when a neighbor of his was ill, he would offer some of the leaves and they would eat it. And this is amazing. I feel so much better. And when, sorry, my husband's just coming in. And eventually he became so well known, people gave him gifts. And he became much better at talking with people to the point where he finally married a young lady. At first, the life together was good. But then she got annoyed because he spent so much time with this plant in the garden. You put all our best water on it, all our clean water on it, and you go and talk to it. And you give it the best soil. What about me? I'm your wife. What about giving me some attention? And he said, well, I love you dearly, but I love the plant as well. Because she didn't know this plant was the source of all their wealth. Well, he went to the next village, taking with him some of the leaves. There are some people there was a fever that had broken out, and so he went to help them. And he said to his wife, please look after the plant. And she said, oh, I don't. Okay. But as soon as he's gone, she went to the plant and she said, you horrible little thing, you've taken my husband away from me. And she poured dirty water on it. And she swore at it and said the most awful things. And then she got the trash can and just didn't have a trash can, but you know what I mean, the dirty rubbish stuff. And she poured it all around it and said, there, take that. And by the time Chu Choi was coming back, he could see his house. But in his garden, he could see this plant. And this plant was floating up into the sky. it was leaving the ground. Its roots trailed down. It was getting higher and higher, and he called out to his wife, "What have you done? What have you done?" And he ran forward and he grabbed hold of the plant, trying to bring it back down. But the plant, it just kept flying higher and higher and higher and higher. And his wife came out and she said, "Jump, come down here." And he said, "I can't, I'll die." The plant took him all the way up to the moon. And when he landed there, the plant came to the ground and then just put its roots out and stayed there. And Chu Choi looked down at the earth below. And then there was a noise. He turned and there was a woman, very pale. She said, "Hello, I'm a moon girl." And he said, "How can I get back to my home?" And she said, "Never. When people come here, they never go back. But this plant, it was so useful." And she said, "Do you think people appreciated it? Did they respect it enough?" And he shook his head and he realized that maybe he should stay there and look after the plant until the people of Earth were ready to receive it and give it the due respect it needed. And that is the story of Chu Choi. And sometimes I call him Choi Chu, and I apologize.
I am sorry, Janet, because every time I'm muted and you lose all the applause, but it was there. Thank you for the story.
Thank you, thank you.
So, Keith, would you like to follow? If you'd like to come and sit here, so you can
Indeed.
address our Zoom audience. Thank you, John. You need the chair. You know, give this to John, and we'll move this around.
Yep. Okay, hello everyone. My name's Keith. And I'd like to tell you a story, which I think has collapsed again, which you may think is familiar to you, but it isn't. And maybe it fits in the theme by the notion that things don't actually have to stay the same. But let my story explain that. There was a young girl who lived on the edge of a forest with her mom in a fair-sized house, a tiny little house to our standards, but a fair-sized house for that time. And she went to the village often to fetch things for her mother, to go on messages, and she became well known about the place. This was a time when young children were sent out on messages, and quite happily. And she was known well because she had a red cloak and a red hood. And in the way of villages, people like to give children nicknames, and she was called Red Riding. And she liked that name, and she liked her suit. And for her 10th birthday, her grandmother, who lived in the middle of the wood in a sizable house because her husband had been a woodlander, made money from cutting from trees and orchards. And for her birthday, her 10th birthday, she bought Red Riding Hood a brooch with a beautiful red glass stone. Now, you also, if you know villages, know that they like a rumour. And the rumour began to go around that Red Riding Hood's brooch was actually a ruby. And the horrified fishwife, how could you buy a girl like that? A ruby, a young girl walking around. Some would say she was flaunting it. Red Riding Hood knew nothing of this because she knew her brooch was just red glass and it was beautiful and she liked it. And she liked it especially because her grandmother had given it to her. Now, one day, her grandmother was poorly. So she packed up a hamper of food and she asked Red Riding Hood to take it to her grandmother, but to stay on the track because there are wolves in the woods and you will be in danger. And this is one of the few instructions that she gave to her daughter. Now, our daughter had never seen a wolf. She'd gone to her grandmother's lots of times, but she dutifully listened to her mother. What they didn't know was, going past the back of the house was a woodcutter. A woodcutter, a big brooch of a man who hardly made any money cutting wood, a man who was dissatisfied with his life. And he heard that the girl with the ruby brooch was going to her grandmother's in the wood. Red Riding Hood set off with a hamper, smiling away. You know how nice it is in springtime to walk through a wood with the sun streaming through the trees and the dappled paths. And she was smiling to herself and enjoying her walk when she heard a strange sound, a strange whimpering sound. And it sounded a bit like a child, but she knew it couldn't be. And against her mother's orders, she put down a hamper and she walked into the wood and came to a small clearing. And there in the clearing was a wolf whimpering. And it didn't take long for her to see the reason for this whimpering was the wolf had its paw on a stick, and in the stick was a huge thorn. And the wolf dare not put his paw down. The pain was so great. And although she was frightened, Red Riding Hood stepped forward, took the stick in her hand, and with a yank pulled it out. And the wolf shuddered and slumped to the ground, and there were spots of blood on the dirt around him. Not waiting, she turned back to the path and picked up her hamper and carried on her way. Now, meanwhile, the woodcutter, by a different route, had made his way to her grandmother's house. He had gone through the door that was never locked, went up the stairs, and there she was with her bonnet on, all wrapped up, red nose, nasty cold. He grabbed grandmother and he shoved her in the cupboard and shut the door. He got a bonnet on his head and he pulled the covers up. And eventually Red Riding Hood arrives. And she goes upstairs and she calls to her grandmother. And the woodcutter says, "Yes, I'm up here, dear." And Red Riding Hood says, "My grandmother, you are poorly. What's happened to your voice?" And she walks in and she sees this girl with just eyes and a bonnet. "Grandmother," she says. Before she could say another word, the woodcutter had thrown the covers off and said, "Enough of this," and picked up his axe and made for Red Riding Hood, who ran down the stairs. Now she knew the house well. This was her grandmother's house. And they ran from room to room with him with his axe raised and her squirming away and running away, terrified, until she ended up in the kitchen, pressed against the hob as he raised his axe. And as he raised his axe, the door crashed open and in burst the wolf. And the wolf sprang on the man and clamped its teeth over the shaft of the axe. And they grappled and bumped into things, knocking plates off the dresser, knocking chairs over, until they eventually fell to the floor and they were rolling over. And finally, the wolf wrenched the axe out of the woodcutter's grasp and bit him on the shoulder. And with a scream, he pushed the wolf off and ran through the door, clutching his shoulder as he went. And the wolf lay on the floor, panting after the exertion of the fight. And Red Riding Hood stood against the hob, eyes wide, mouth open, almost like a silent scream. But the wolf looked up and looked at Red Riding Hood and nodded and walked out the door. Meanwhile, Granny had escaped from the cupboard and she came down the stairs and got to the bottom of the stairs just as the wolf was leaving. And there was Red Riding Hood looking amazed. And she said what every granny would say under these circumstances. "Well, my dear," she said, "after an adventure like that, we should have a nice cup of tea." And that story is for our mutual friend Norman from Toronto. because he told me several years ago he was telling stories in a children's hospital, and one of the children said, "I want Red Riding," and he thought, "Good, yeah, I know that story. It's simple." She said, "No, I want the wolf to be the hero." Thank you.
Okay. So that story we heard from Keith Rogers came from Norman Perrin. Norman Perrin was the creator of this version of the classical tale, Little Red Riding Hood. It's very nice. I really like it when we use traditional stories, but change the stereotypes. We don't want to be there anymore. So let's see, Karen, my darling, since I'm ping-ponging between I'm table tennis between people here and you on Zoom, would you like to share a story with us?
Oh yeah, I'm just trying to get the video on. My computer's a bit slow.
Okay.
No, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Yeah, I would like to see you as well. So. Still no camera.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but we cannot see you.
Oh, okay. It's showing my camera's on at the moment.
Yeah, it's on. We can see you now. Awesome.
Okay.
Have you got a story for us?
Yes. So up in the northeast of China, there lived a peasant called Ming Fai. And Ming Fai had a good heart. He lived in a tiny little hovel. He didn't have much. He worked hard all day. And he also had a little strip where he could grow rice. So after he'd worked, he went and grew rice, and he'd go home tired every day. But he would always share what he had, no matter how little it was. And one night he fell asleep, and as he slept, he dreamt that he had a magic paintbrush, and everything he painted with this magic paintbrush came to life. Well, he woke up in the morning and he stretched, and as he started to get up and make his bed under his tatty, battered piece of cloth that he used for a pillow, he found a paintbrush. And he looked at it. He was absolutely stunned. And he quickly hid it under his bed, and he went off to work. And after work, he went and tended his rice field. And as soon as he could, he came home. And he went outside his hovel and he scratched a patch on the dry earth. And then he took this paintbrush and he painted a little butterfly. And as he put the last touch to the butterfly, it suddenly flew off. It came to life and flew off. And he was amazed. His neighbor came out to see what he was doing. And he said he was just painting. He didn't tell his neighbor what had happened. And then he smiled to himself, and he painted a bowl of jasmine rice, a pair of chopsticks, and some chicken and green pepper in black bean sauce. And as soon as he put the finishing stroke to it, it came to life. And his neighbor just looked shocked as he saw this bowl of fragrant, steaming rice in front of him, and he could smell the sound of he could smell the food. And Ming Fai said to him, "Come and eat and enjoy." And the other neighbors came out. And as they came out, he started to draw more and more dishes, crispy duck and dim sum and baked fish and all sorts of wonderful things. And as the stars came out that night, the villagers were feasting on the most wonderful feast that they had ever had. And once they were all full, one of his neighbors rushed off and came back with a bucket, which had a hole in it. And another came back with a broken wheel that had broken on his cart and made his cart unusable. And Ming Fai just painted a perfectly new bottom for the bucket. And he painted a perfectly new wheel, which the neighbor took off and put on his cart. And eventually I said, I can't do any more tonight. We need to sleep. But tomorrow morning, well, he didn't go to bed. He waited until everyone had gone to sleep. And then he went out and he went to the one end of the village and he painted a river coming through the village so that the next day the villagers didn't have to go right up past the village and walk for miles to find a stream and then carry the water back in the buckets. The water was running past their doors. And he went off to work and he went and attended his paddy field. And when he came home, there was a stream of people coming with bits and pieces that needed mending, and he painted everything. And everyone became really, really happy and contented. And because they'd never had much, they weren't a greedy village, but news of such a thing travels quickly, and news of the magic paintbrush came to the ears of a rich, greedy young man who ruled a nearby town. And so he sent his servants to go and to kidnap Ming Fai and to take him and his paintbrush and throw them into the dungeons. And then the following day, when he called his servants and said, bring me this magic paintbrush, they went and they found that Ming Fai and the paintbrush had gone. Ming Fai had simply painted some stairs up to the tiny window at the top and had got out. He'd painted a ladder. And so Ming Fai went back home. Again, they tried just to get the magic paintbrush, and they took the paintbrush and tried to paint with it, but nothing would happen. It needed Ming Fai to do the painting. And so again, one night they came and they kidnapped Ming Fai and they separated him from the paintbrush and the greedy rich man. And he demanded that Ming Fai painted him a mountain of gold.
Because
Paint me a mountain of gold as big as you can.
Karen, can you hear me?
Well, Ming Fai thought for a moment. A sea. He started to paint an ocean, and the rich ruler got angry. He said, what are you doing? I want. And he continued to paint this massive, massive ocean, which of course became to life. And then he painted behind. But now Ming Fai had a problem. The rich ruler had a problem. How? Ming Fai painted this wonderful big ship that could hold lots of people. And as soon as it was finished and came to life, the rich, greedy man called his friends and his relatives, his rich, greedy friends. He didn't really want to share the gold with them, but he needed a bit of help getting it onto the boat, and he could deal with them afterwards. And as soon as the boat was loaded with as many rich, greedy people like himself that he thought he needed, off it set across the ocean. And when it was in the middle of the ocean, Ming Fai painted a huge wave. And as the wave came to life, it came up and it swamped the ship and it went down and they were all drowned. Ming Fai took his paintbrush. He went back to his village and he continued to use his paintbrush. He only ever used it for good. And every night as the stars came out, they were peaceful in that part of the world. The end.
I think you could not hear the applause, but you must have seen it, Karen, yeah? Thank you for the story. We lost you for a little while. You had frozen, but we followed most of it, so it's fine. It's okay. A very nice story. Hey,
Thank you.
thank you. Rosie, would you like to share a story?
Can I just say, Desmond, I wrote the version of the Red Riding Hood.
Oh, you
I
did?
wrote it for Norman.
Ah. Long ago, in a land far away, there was a kingdom. A kingdom in a deep valley.
It was a very fertile valley that grew beautiful fruit and vegetables and flowers. And the people who lived in that valley would trade with their neighbours. They would go up the mountain track, out over the top, and they would trade with all the surrounding towns and villages beyond the kingdom. Now, a sadness came to the kingdom one day when both the king and the queen fell ill. And it wasn't long before they died. And their young son, only just beginning to move into manhood, was told he was the king. He said, well, I'm too young, I don't know what to do. And they said, don't worry, your father's advisor, who has helped him for many years, he's a very wise man, he will support and help you. And so the young man set about learning the arts of kingship. And for a while, it was okay, you know, he was guided by the wise man. He was advised by his old wise nurse, although she'd retired, was always there for a cup of tea and a bit of advice. And in times of peace and plenty, there wasn't much went wrong. Then one day, it had been a hot, hot summer, and the air had grown so thick it was as if you could have sliced it. And as often happens in the summer, the clouds rolled in and the thunder rumbled and the lightning started to crack and the rain came down in torrents. The rain washed down the mountainsides, the thunder and lightning rolled, the lightning flashed and the thunder, when it hit the valley sides, rolled round and round and round as if it would never end. And it was as if there was a giant up on that mountain throwing rocks at them. The hail was pounding their roofs, and people started imagining there must be some great creature up there absolutely pounding us. And eventually the sky started to clear. The thunder was rumbling gently away. And you had that silence that is so peaceful after the storm. And the sun came out the next day, and the villagers collected what crops they could have saved, and they put them on their carts and they went to trade with the other villages and towns beyond their borders. Only the problem was, when they got to the mountain pass, that giant that they imagined was actually there, was actually up on the mountain. And every time they tried to leave their valley, that great creature would shout and bawl and throw rocks down on them and pound them, and they would have to go back. And they were terrified. And after a while, they realized nobody was trading. I mean, they could grow a few vegetables, but because they were so lush and verdant, they hadn't bothered making things. So when they started running out of goods that they needed, they couldn't actually find anywhere to go. And so eventually they came to the king and said, Your Majesty, you need to do something. You've got to call out the troops. Well, this was a very small kingdom, and they only had about 24 troops, mostly chosen because they were quite tall and handsome and looked good on a horse. And they came in my days, yeah. So when they were sent up the valley, and they were all, it wasn't long before they got up there and they could hear the roaring and yelling, and rocks started pounding down. And so they turned their horses round, galloped back to the palace and went, Can't really help you, sir. Well, what was to happen? The longer it went on, the worse it got. The more people tried to go up that mountain, the more the giant would throw things. And, you know, you could see him up there dancing on the top of the hillside. And it came to pass that in the end, the advisor said, Sire, you've got to do something, because if you can't save your people, then they won't want you as their king anymore. You'll be out of a job. And he said, well, even the army couldn't do it. I'm just a boy, really. What am I supposed to do? And the wise man, the advisor, was so wise that he knew the answer. And he said, go and see your old nurse. She's an old woman. They know everything. And so off he went and had a nice cup of tea with Nanny. And after he'd had his cup of tea and poured his woes out, she sat there looking, and she said, do you know the giant's name? No. Why would I know the giant's name? Well, I think you'll find the answer is find out the giant's name, boy. Well, how am I supposed to do that? She said, do I have to do all your thinking for you? You're the king, work it out. So he went back and he had his horse saddled, and it was a great sinking heart that he started slowly to go up the mountainside, and he could see the giant on the hill waiting for him, and he going slowly. And who knows whether he'd have actually been brave enough to turn to face the giant. But just then a horsefly had come along. straight in the horse's backside. And the horse woof, straight up the hill, galloping, galloping, galloping. And the poor king was hanging on, and he was getting nearer the giant and nearer the giant, and the odd rock was coming down. But you know, a funny thing happened, because the nearer the giant he got, normally the nearer you get to something, the bigger it gets, doesn't it? But weirdly, that giant that looked quite tiny up on the hill, the nearer he got to him, by the time he rode up to him, he was about 3'2". And the king looked round and he went, "Who are you?" "I'm a giant." "No, you're not." "Well, yes, I am. I'm a big giant and you're supposed to be scared of me, boy." "Well, I'm not actually." And this could have gone on for a very long time, but the king, who was now coming from boyhood to manhood, came to his senses and remembered what he was there for. And he went, "Well, if you're a giant, tell me what your name is." And the giant drew up his 3'2" and he went, "My name is Fear." And that's when the king realized that the more energy and the more you give to the giant Fear, the bigger the giant gets. And if you can take that away, maybe some of your giants are only 3'2".
Yeah. So, I heard this story from Roshin before, but there is a backstory to the story. So, Roshin, if you would like to share that information, it's free.
Well, there's a connection in this room, because Healing Under the Stars was something that where I first met Janet Dowling, who was talking earlier, and she and I were part of a team that went over to the Holy Land on a trip organised by Emerson College, and it was called Storytelling as a Pathway to Peace. And we worked with many stories. We spent 4 weeks preparing down in Sussex to go and work with mixed groups. They had to be both Palestinian and Israeli, across faiths. We wouldn't do work with just one group. It had to be people who were trying to work with each other. And the giant fear was one of the stories we worked with, amongst others. And we toured around, and the idea was we would finish our 2-week tour at Kibbutz Haduf, having a beautiful celebration under the stars with Bedouin people and the Israelis in the kibbutz, etc. But before we did, Roy Galor, the Israeli who ran the project, said, "We've been invited to a town on a refugee camp on the West Bank called Tul Karim. Now, the Foreign Office have advised us we shouldn't go, and if we do go there, they don't want anything to do with us." Well, sitting there in sunny Sussex, going, "No, we will go and see our brothers and sisters on the West Bank. We have nothing to fear." So off we would go. And as we were driven out of Jerusalem, and the further we got, you know, you're chatting in the car, and funnily enough, the chat got quieter and quieter the nearer you got. You know, we passed the great big wall and the turrets and the watchtowers, and we got to the border and everybody had got very quiet. And then my telephone pinged, and such was the paranoia that I thought, "Oh my God, they know where we are." So someone else's phone pinged, and so with great trepidation, we kind of lifted our phones up, expecting somebody on the other end to be going, "We know where you are." And it said, "Welcome to Palestine, telephone company, smell the jasmine." So anyway, long story short, we went to Tul Karim. We looked around, and it surprised me, because refugee camp isn't what you think. It's been there so long, it's bricks and mortar. And we were working with the Combatants for Peace, who are warriors on both sides, who have come together because they realised the gun isn't the answer. And they'd invited 25 Palestinians, 25 Israelis to all encounter with each other in an olive grove, facilitated by the Combatants for Peace. And then we storytellers would have subgroups to work with. And it was quite tough going. Actually, people with fear and anger on both sides coming together, but the will was there. And then we split into small groups, and I was talking to a group like this, except we were all on the floor in an olive grove. And then I realized nobody was looking at me. I had not got anyone's attention. They were looking behind me. And the hair on the back of my neck went up, and I slowly turned round, and there was an Israeli soldier pointing a gun at me. Yeah, bit hairy. Fortunately, an ex-major from the Israeli army who was with us went and talked to them and explained we were doing nothing illegal and that they couldn't really do anything about us. So they sort of said, "Well, we'll go away, but we're coming back." And they did come back, and we were warned that, you know, this was the way they tend to do it. They harass people. Anyway, they came back, and this young man was still there with a gun. And one of my colleagues went, I'm going to go and talk to him. Well, by now I was convinced I was going to die anyway. And I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to die, you're going to see the whites of my eyes. And I marched up to this soldier with a gun. And as I got up to him, he turned into a 19-year-old, looking terrified of me and the other storytellers and the other people. And that's when we realised, you know, that story is so true, because the soldier turned into a scared boy. I'm not naive, he did still have a loaded gun. However, all was well, they went away, somebody had taken a photograph of them, which is illegal. So we all had to pack up very quickly. And by the time we were leaving, we got the armoured cars and the armoured police cars, but we all left quietly and enjoyed the rest of our trip.
But you did not tell them what the boy told you.
Oh, and he said to me, what are you doing? What are you doing here? I said, we're telling stories. And he rested his gun down and he went, oh, wish you could have heard them.
Right.
And I said, well, you can. He said, unfortunately not. And peace has not broken out, but maybe a little bit of difference has been made. Thank you.
So, yeah, that is, it's okay, absolutely. And you for being here. Thank you. So that is the power of stories, and that is how hopefully peace can be achieved when people realize from any end that it's just people and not monsters or heroes or whatever politicians present them to be. When it comes down to humanity, there's not much to divide us, really. We are lucky enough to have the mayor of the town of Maxwell here with us today. Would you like to come and say a few words? Yes, please, because I cannot move the laptop around. So he's going to give us a little bit of information about the wonderful festival and his town, of course.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. I know this is all very new to me. So and welcome physically and digitally to Much Wenlock. It's a little town in Shropshire, which we're very proud. We've got a great community, and you know, we're particularly glad to welcome Get a Word in Edgeways to the town, because it's really resurrecting things that have happened in the past. It is something that we've been rather good at over the years. We go back to the Victorian times, as well as the great William Penny Brooks inspiring modern Olympics here in Much Wenlock. Part of the Olympics wasn't just about running and jumping, but also included cultural work as well. So it was a much more rounded event, which I know there's been talk about it for the current modern Olympics as well. Since then, we used to have a wonderful poetry festival under the care of an organisation of Anna Drina, which was successful for many, many years. And of course, the storytelling with Mike Rust, who is forever present and he's forever pushing your cause in the town. And so he is constantly working on behalf of the cause of telling stories. So yeah, it is really great pleasure to have you here. I'm hoping you're having a good weekend of it all.
Absolutely.
That's great. And we look forward to seeing you back again. And so it's and perhaps even bigger and greater things in the future. So welcome, have a great time, and we look forward to seeing you back.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. May I say, Mr. Mayor, this was
Sorry, my name is Mark Stevens. So I couldn't
Mark
introduce myself.
Mr. Mayor, that is rather short and to the point for a politician. Very well done. So, supposedly, Mr. Ross, would you please? Supposedly, this would be the time that the story round would finish, but we have Claire here with us, and we have not heard a single word other than English today, have we? And Claire is fluent in English and Welsh. So let's see what comes out of that.
Well, to tell the truth, I am not a fluent Welsh speaker. Dysgwr, I am a learner of the Welsh language because I've been living in Wales for the last 10 years. So I'm going to tell you a story. And my enw y stori ydy Ifan am y Fanwy. And the story of Ifan the Fanwy, well, my friend told me it, and he lives on the island of Ynys Môn, the island of Anglesey. And he heard it from his grandfather, who also lived on Ynys Môn. But this story, I think, has roots beyond Wales. Amser maith yn ôl, oedd na hogyn sy'n enw Ifan. A pwy oedd Ifan? Well, Ifan was, he was an orphan. And he worked on the land. He worked for his uncle on his uncle's farm, Moel y Ci. And the uncle was not a friendly man. He was not a kind man. He made Ifan work hard, and there was not a lot of food for Ifan. Ond Ifan yn gweithio galed iawn. And roedd gan Ifan un ffrind. Ifan had one friend. Hen tarw oedd o. His one friend was an old ox. And Ifan himself, well, he was quite a pleasant young man. He was clever. He was hardworking. He did the best he could with very little. A pwy oedd Myfanwy? Well, Myfanwy would not live on this earth at all. Oedd hi un o saith chwiorydd. She was one of 7 sisters, and these 7 sisters were granddaughters of the heavenly empress. A pa oedd ei gwaith? Well, these 7 sisters, they were weavers. And their job was to weave dillad y diwia, the clothes of the gods. And if you look up the sky, and well, today the sky is a little bit grey, but that is a sky with colours that they have woven. And sometimes they would weave the gold of the sun, and sometimes they would weave the silver of the moon, or the white of the stars, or the magical reds and pinks of a sunset. Or even some days they got carried away and wove greens and blues and pinks of auroras when they were feeling really fancy. So the youngest of the weavers, well, oedd hi Myfanwy. And, you know, as girls do, they would sit and they would chat. And they would look down o'r nefoedd i'r daear, and they would look at what the human beings were up to. They would look at the gossip going on, and they would look at all the patterns, and they would talk about it. A sbïodd Myfanwy Ifan. Myfanwy became obsessed with this young cowherd. She thought, he looks nice. And she watched him as he went about his hard day-to-day life. Ac un diwrnod sleifiodd hi o'r nefoedd I ddaear. She spun a long skein of wool, and she climbed down that skein of wool from the heavens to the earth. She hid behind a tree and looked at him and thought, oh, he looks even better close up. And so it was that the two came to meet, Myfanwy and Ifan, and Myfanwy and Ifan got on very well. So much so that Myfanwy decided she was not going to go back to the nefoedd, to the sky, to the heavens. She was going to stay and be with Ifan. And so she moved into his little hut. And being a weaver, what did she do? Being a woman, what did she do? Well, she started to weave curtains and rugs and lampshades, and already life became a little bit more comfortable. Mwy gyfforddus. Ac ar ôl amser, well, oedd na babi. Ac oedd na ail babi. So after a while, they had 2 children together. They were happy. Ond, roedd Imerawderes ddim yn hapus. The Sky Empress was not pleased. She had by this time worked out that her grandchild was gone missing, and she tracked down where she was with that human. And so she sent her soldiers to take Myfanwy back up to the skies. And so Myfanwy went back up to the skies. And then Ifan was he wasn't on his own, because he had his 2 children, his family, and he had the old ox. But Myfanwy was gone. Nôl I nefoedd. And she became the star. She became the star of Vega. That's what she becomes in the sky. Ond I didn't tell you this about the hen darw. The hen darw, mae o'n medru siarad. The ox would speak, and the ox said to Ifan, I am old, dwi'n hen iawn, and I can see that you should be with Myfanwy. So I want you to do this. I want you to kill me. I want you to slaughter me. I want you to sacrifice me. Take my skin, make a kite from it, and then you can fly to the skies. And so it was that the ox, Ivan killed the ox, a roedd o wedi creu barcud, like a big kite, with his hands at the edges and his head at the top, and his skin to give him some, like, I don't know what you call it. My aerospace vocabulary isn't great, but anyway, to give him some lift. And he put un babi yn un llaw, un babi i'r llaw arall, little baskets at the corner of the kite, a hedfanodd Ivan o ddeiar i'r nefoedd. And he flew up to the sky, but the Sky Empress, she saw him coming, and she took her hairpin, a roedd hi wedi creu afon. Afon drwy'r awyr nos. She created this silvery river to divide the night sky, so that when Ivan arrived and he became the star Altair, well, between him and Myfanwy was a llwybr lleithog, the Milky Way. And so the two lovers were still apart. But everybody saw this sort of story, and wasn't it so sad? So there were some magpies, and the local word for this is dasturi bigod, is a magpie. That's what my friend recorded. We were trying to work it out this morning, what the local word for magpie is on Anglesey. We think dasturi bigod is a magpie, but this magpie got together with its friends, and once a year they organised themselves to make in bont dros the llwybr lleithog, a bridge. And on that day, the two lovers, Ivan and Myfanwy, climbed up the bridge so they could meet and they could be together. And on that day, oedd y diwrnod, oedd y nefoedd yn, like, hyfryd iawn. The skies were particularly beautiful that day. You know, sometimes when there's a cloud and you can barely find the words to describe its beauty, or there's a colour in the sky that you can, well, isn't it just beyond words? That was how it was on that day that those two lovers met. But it was a once a year thing, and so then they had to come back down the bridge and back to being Vega and back to being Altair. But it is said that once a year this thing happens, and Ivan and Myfanwy can be together in the skies. So dyma fy stori o Gymru, ond hefyd dwi'n meddwl stori o China. This is very, very similar to a story from China. So we're not sure whether Adrian's grandfather heard this version in the local tradition in Anglesey on Ynys Môn, or whether Adrian's father, who was a farmer himself, but a literate farmer, whether he found that in a book from China and decided that actually it should have taken place at Fferm Moelyci on Ynys Môn. Thank you.
So let's see. Good. Okay. Now it is time for our story round. Yeah, it was an awesome story, Karen, indeed. Oh, hi, Babasi, welcome. Hi. So, Karen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh,
It's like 7 a.m. where I am.
really early morning.
I woke up especially for this. I'm going to try to, no, I will, no, I'm not going to promise to behave. I'm here to have fun and to enjoy, but especially for you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here so early. So we're going to do this story workshop now, and hopefully more people will join us, maybe, if they have time. So Claire can take Babasi and Karen with her, I think, yes, in Zoom.
Make him into a host.
I have made you into a co-host.
And I need to be a host, actually.
You need to be the host. Okay, give me a second, please. Make host. Here we are. Yes. Okay, so now Babasi and Karen will go to a virtual room together with Claire. Have you got it?
John, is your Zoom allow breakout rooms?
If it doesn't, it's okay. You can do it online. I have shared a constellation with you, Claire, on Messenger, which you can share with your group. So what we'll do here, you'll have to work with John, I'm afraid.
I think we can cope with that, John.
Would you like to take part?
I will go soon, but
Okay.
I've got to stay a little bit longer.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll do now is that each group has a constellation, one of the well-known ones, but they are given this picture with no reference whatsoever, no name, no connection to any story. So you're supposed to look at the connected dots and come up with a story. What this series of stars reminds you of. It can be a person, it can be an animal, it can be whatever you like, and make up the bare bones of a story, because we don't have too much time. Let's say around 20 minutes, you create a story around it, and then you come back and share with the rest of us. Is that okay?
Okay.
Awesome. Karen, are you in for it? So, okay.
Give me a moment to get some coffee into me.
Absolutely, yeah. Go get some coffee. You're gonna need it.
So I'm still adjusting my audio. What are we about to do?
Okay. You're supposed to look at the constellation that Claire has shared with you. And together with Karen and Claire, Babasi, you're supposed to come up with an idea of what this constellation reminds you of and make a story on it. Is it a person? Is it an animal? How did it come to be there up in the sky? Is that all right?
We're making the story together, or
You're making the story together. And since we don't have Zoom rooms, people are going to watch you do it. Okay, so are you going to get your cup of coffee, Babasi?
that on your one?
Oh, you've got it already. Great.
I'm gonna chat on you one to them.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You do that.
Awesome. I've come over to Despina's Zoom to do this. So we can see the picture of the stars there. But yeah, I think Babasi, are you going to have a coffee, or are you going to stay and have you got any ideas about what this is, this constellation? What could we imagine it being? Oh, Karen's saying a butterfly. Feel free to unmute and talk, Karen, as well, because it's there are some people in the room over there. And then we can hang out and do this on Zoom.
Okay, I've got quite a bad signal, but we'll see how we go.
Oh, Babasi's saying an anteater. Cool. I don't know, I'm looking. I can almost see like a horse or a camel or something. I like butterfly though. Yeah, which one should we go with? Tell you what. Tell me a little bit more about.
Karen's having fun.
Yeah, I was just trying to look at it from different angles.
Ah.
Yeah, I don't know. When you say anteater, what is it that's anteater-y about it? Tell me, because I don't know anteaters very well.
Oh, well, okay, so I'm looking at this picture, and a few weeks ago, I was doing some research for some story, I forget which, and it reminds me of the picture of the anteater I saw. The little tail, but the way the neck is elongated, and there's a star where the tongue would shoot out, and all the little things surrounding it are ants, and it's about to have breakfast.
There is a lot of food in the night sky, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. How about you, Karen? What is it that says butterfly to you about this concept?
It's just the shape of the wings. It could be one of those winged fairy type creatures. If you turn it upside down, it looks more like a bat than a butterfly.
And what are the characteristics of butterflies? What sort of things do butterflies do?
They fly around and they flitter flutter around plants, don't they? So this one's flying and fluttering around the stars. So whether it's drawing energy from the stars or food from the stars.
There's definitely something about our story definitely has to involve food.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know whether it's breakfast where you are or lunchtime where you are or dinner time where you are. Maybe there's a food thing going on.
It's
It is definitely
lunchtime.
breakfast where I am.
It's lunchtime here. I do like your anteater idea though.
Yeah. Well, tell you what, I don't know much about anteaters, so I'm curious. I'm curious to learn more about anteaters.
They eat ants,
They eat ants.
but they never eat uncles. That's a bad joke. I'm waking up.
Okay.
So are the stars aunts or uncles then?
I mean, I have a question for you two. How did this anteater get into the stars? What did he do or she do that meant that she wound up in the stars or he wound up in the stars?
So this particular anteater was the king of anteaters and was eating ants everywhere. Ant. You could say it was anxious. It was eating ants. And at one time, there were too many stars in the sky. And you really couldn't see anything because there were so many stars that the night sky was almost all white. And this anteater was so good at doing what it does, eating ants, that the gods gathered around this anteater and said, look, we want people to be able to see us in the night sky. And so because the anteater was so good at what it was doing, it made the anteater ascend to the night sky and said, you must eat enough stars so people can see us and they can see the night sky. Because what good is the night sky if it's not at night? And so the anteater has been eating all these stars because they look like ants to the anteater to make the night sky so that people can see through the darkness.
I mean, I like that, but I feel like he's like a really well-behaved anteater.
Well, yes, that's why he got elevated to be in the night sky.
I feel really sorry for all the stars he's eaten. Why is he eating some stars and not others?
Because there were so many stars in the night sky that the night sky did not look like night at all. It was
yes, but how?
It was almost an opaque white night, and
I get that.
You could barely tell it from the day, and so they needed to clean it up somewhat, and so they elevated this particular anteater into the heavens so he could clip because there's so many stars. And so this anteater began to eat enough stars so that the night sky looks like it's at night.
Does it just eat stars that are misbehaving? Or because all those stars that are up there because the gods have put them up there and they're there for a reason, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Who was the god that put too many stars in the night sky? Who was that god?
The god that needed coffee. And even that might be a punishment because he did eat one uncle. Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. So Uncle Bob got eaten and he got put into the sky.
I mean, I can imagine this anteater is clearly so good at eating. I mean, was he eating when the anteater lived on Earth to begin with? Was he so good at eating ants that he was actually becoming a problem? Was he an anteater then, or did he just eat all the things?
No, they primarily eat ants.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm sorry, I just thought of another bad pun. I'm trying not to tell it. But he primarily eats ants. And sometimes they eat the little baby ants, the grubs. And that's where you get the expression getting your grub on. I don't know if they have that on your part. That means getting your grub on. Okay, anyhow.
I could tell the food was just going to be a theme. It's just the time of day we're at.
Yeah, so
And because there's so many
basically,
stars, he can never eat too many stars because there are more stars than there are an anteater.
Yeah. I mean, is there just one? Is there just the one anteater in the sky, or are there many star anteaters?
I only see one.
Yeah. And I mean, Karen, do you think the anteater has any friends in the sky? Non-anteater friends? Like if he's near to, I don't know what constellations is, but if he was like near to other constellations, would the anteater have any friends or enemies in the sky?
well, I should think some of the stars are his enemies. I wonder if some of the
they're not
stars are
enemies,
trying to stop being
They're
eaten.
food. He doesn't dislike, in fact, he likes them. He likes them so much he eats them.
I mean, yeah. I mean, what's to stop this anteater going and eating the other constellations? Is
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
something? What do you reckon, Karen?
Would that be a constellation prize?
What do you think, Karen?
I guess the gods that put in there. Well, I don't know. The other constellations, did they have as many stars? Did they have a problem in the other constellations, or was it just this constellation that had too many stars?
Maybe that's the case. Oh, I can see a comment from Malcolm. Malcolm is groaning at the quality of the puns. But I think we're doing a good job. Hey, Malcolm or
Excellent.
Mike or anyone else who's on the Zoom, whether you can feel free to drop in the chat if you have any ideas for the life and adventures of the sky anteater.
He needs a name, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he should have a star name.
Yeah.
What would be a good name for a sky anteater?
Bob. No, not really.
Hungry.
Oh, that Hungry or Henri?
Yes.
Henri.
Henri. Brilliant.
Henri the Hungry, the anteater, the anteater, the is this, do you know, I'm just looking at this thinking, and I don't know, I am really actually not, I'm such an earthbound person that I look up the sky and I go, oh, stars, but my eyes don't even focus so well. And I'm looking at this going, is this the W-shaped constellation that's Cassiopeia?
I've no idea.
If anyone knows, put it in the chat. Yeah, which I think is one that rotates. I could be wrong, but if it's that W-shaped one that rotates, it kind of goes upside down and then turns around through the year. If this anteater was rotating or moving through the night sky, what would he be up to?
Eating. Do they do anything but eat?
Yes, but we won't talk about that this is a family-friendly show, right?
Allude to the other things that, I mean, what bad stuff could an anteater get up to if he's on his own?
You say what bad stuff?
Or good stuff?
That they have to eat so many ants just to stay alive and healthy. I don't think they have much time to do anything else.
Fair enough.
Except for maybe brew an occasional cup of coffee so Baba C can wake up.
I mean, maybe he's just turning around and moving through the night sky so he can eat more ants, I mean stars. Maybe that's what it's about. He's like a cosmic Hoover.
Oh yeah.
Oh, vacuum
Henri the
cleaner,
Cosmic
yes.
Hoover.
You know, and I have at home, I have a Henry Hoover. Maybe he's like the cosmic Henry Hoover. Henri Anteater.
Oh, he's a Stella Hoover.
Stella Hoover. I mean, it's important to keep things tidy, right? I mean, it's an interesting idea, isn't it? Like that there was too much, and then things need to bring into balance, and something brings things,
yeah,
bringing that balance, and that's a cosmic Hoover.
Perhaps he should have a girlfriend called Stella.
And is Stella an anteater, or is Stella some kind of other being?
I would say, go
on.
ahead, Karen.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, wait a minute. I forgot what I was going to say. I need more coffee.
I haven't had any coffee. That's my problem.
Karen,
Yeah.
what's your vision for this anteater's girlfriend?
Okay, well, she could be another anteater, but then we do need a bit of a story. Or she could be, perhaps she's something else, and Henri is teaching her how to eat the stars.
Because he thinks they're ants.
I mean, it's interesting because stars are like little balls of burning hydrogen or whatever, aren't they? They're like, I mean, what kind of thing would go in and snack on little balls of burning hydrogen? I mean, I probably would if I was hungry enough, but yeah. I mean, there's kind of quite a lot of power in burning hydrogen. I mean, that's the
Yeah, so that's probably what makes him rotate, all that power.
Are you saying he's like propelled by farts or something like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You don't get too many good stories with a fart in them, do you? So
And that big bright mass is the stomach where all the digestion is taking place.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. His in the middle of him glows so bright because of all the stars that he's chewing within him, that he's digesting. I like that. What about this anteater girlfriend? We haven't got very far with her, have we?
I think Stella's a hedgehog that has
Stella's a
just come along, and she's seen his glowing body and fallen completely and totally and head over heels in love.
I like that.
You're hedging your bets.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she doesn't want to hog all the limelight.
And how did Henri and Stella meet? Did they meet in the stars? Or did they did they meet in the stars? Or were they both once upon a time lovers on the earth?
I'd like to think they met in the stars, but then we need a story about how Stella got into the stars. And
they were starstruck lovers.
I mean, hedgehogs have a difficult time on Earth now, don't they? Because like I don't know where I live, once upon a time it was very rural, but increasingly people build more roads, people build more houses, and then there's less habitat for the hedgehogs. And the roads are really bad because they can get squashed. So maybe she was like just looking for somewhere that she could be. And so she accidentally climbed up into the stars, and well, there were all these like little crunchy, shiny things to eat. And she's wandering around, and then she sees something big and shiny. And is it a W shape or is it an anteater?
okay, so she gets a little ladder in the stars to climb up. So how does that ladder come? Maybe she cries out to the gods, or there's some little people around, little fairy folk, and they hear her cry, and she gives them I don't know, she hunts out a truffle and gives it to them, and they provide this this ladder, the silk ladder up to the stars.
Well, maybe she gets run over on the road, and then a shaman comes by and prays. And as the shaman prays for this little hedgehog that got squished, it's like this ladder of light appears, and Stella finds her little feet climbing up the ladder, and she thinks, well, this is going to be a good adventure. Could be one way to get to the stars. But I think yours is a bit more practical.
You think what?
I think yours is a bit more practical, actually.
Wait, how did we go from talking about an anteater to a hedgehog?
Yeah.
It's the anteater's girlfriend.
Okay, and I need coffee?
Stella, the hedgehog. Yeah, we're not content with like just creating one story for one constellation. No, the sky is full of constellations. We don't have to limit ourselves. There's so many stars out there.
Yeah.
mean, maybe those little three on the right-hand edge of this picture are Stella's bristles. It's 12:30. How much time have we got to speak? There's been a.
How much time do you need?
I don't
I
know.
think they said 20 minutes, but I don't know how much of that has gone.
Okay. Okay. So we need to work out who's gonna tell this story. Do either of you feel like you can remember enough bits and pieces to pull together a story of?
Barbara can do that, but he'll give an entirely different story.
I mean, or do you two want to do it between you, where you bounce back between you and tell the story of the anteater?
We could try that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Are you up for that, Babasi? Just kind of like telling the story with Karen and you bounce off each other and maybe some new stuff gets made up too, who knows?
Well, Karen, if you want to hedge your bets and talk about the anteater and his girlfriend who is a hedgehog, will she be hogging up the story?
Well, that's what I said. I didn't want her to hog the limelight.
I think I'm excited about this hedgehog. I think the hedgehog should be in the story. Like, so yeah, so maybe Babasi, if you tell all about the anteater and how you got in there, and Karen, you can tell all about the hedgehog and how she got there, and you know.
Yeah, okay. That sounds fair enough, doesn't it?
Stories is, you know, that's
Okay.
that's the brief, right?
So whenever you're ready, tell me please do.
Yeah. Are we good with that?
Yeah, and then we need to work out how to end the story.
Well, if you're ending, Karen, you just end it however you want. Have you got
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Take it however you want. So unless anyone's got any genius ideas in the next 1 minute before the been a bit together.
Are you all right with that, Baba?
Okay. I literally have not been awake for 20 minutes.
No, this is a great way to wake up. You're still half.
I am trying so hard.
Thank you. Thank you for showing up and thank you for joining in so willingly with the engagement.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Whoa. Yeah, Karen and Babasi between them can tell this story. I'm just gonna stop the share for the share that.
Let's see, you need to make me a host so I can share the next constellation with the people.
Okay, yeah.
So we're gonna get the story now.
Okay.
If you want to come around and listen.
Ah,
So I don't think people can see the constellation unless they are on Zoom, right?
I've just unshared it, so I think it's really nice to see people's faces as they tell.
Yeah, but so that people know what picture we're talking about
Okay.
for a minute.
Maybe.
I heard my name.
That
Excellent.
was your friend John Rowe, but give us a minute.
Okay.
Ah,
I'm gonna try.
from my side of the world, morning to you all.
Okay. Okay, so
Here we are. Unplug this because it's getting in your way. Awesome. So we can see the constellation now. So this is what Babasi and Karen and Claire created a story on, and we're gonna have the story in well, we can stop sharing, yeah, so that people know what we're talking about now. And the floor is yours, my beloved people. Who's starting?
I'll start. Long ago, start now?
Yes, yes.
Long ago, shortly after the before time, but not the now time, there was an anteater, a ferocious anteater that was eating ants almost quicker than other ants. And this anteater was feared because, like its name said, it ate ants. And anteaters have very long tongues to go down into the tunnels of the massive hills and the buried underground areas of the ants. And this anteater was eating ants left and right, right and left, up and down and up. Now, the night sky was new. In fact, it was so new, it had an overabundance of stars. But we'll get back to that in a moment. Because people could barely tell the difference between daytime and nighttime. That's just how many stars there were. But the anteater was so busy eating ants because they must eat ants in order to survive. And this anteater was the anteater of all anteaters. And the ants were complaining. He's eating too many of us. Something must be done about him. And it must be done now. I don't know if ants sound like that, but hey. So the anteaters went to talk to their protector. And the protector said, well, I don't know what to say. He is an anteater, but I don't want all of you gone. And this anteater got got an idea. And the anteater, the god said, look, he's wiping out the ants. But we don't want to hurt him because he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. That's why he's called an anteater. But there are too many stars in the night sky. We can barely tell it's night. So they got together and they caused the anteater to ascend into the night sky. And he said, you must eat these stars like they were ants. You must eat stars until people can tell it is night. Don't eat them all, but eat until the people can see that the night is night and day is day. And the anteater, having a ferocious appetite, began to eat stars as if they were ants, and his long tongue would whip out, and began to devour the stars at night. And star by star, the night sky got darker and darker and darker and darker and darker. And the anteater continued to eat. Next.
Karen, are you here? Karen, Babasi gave us half of your wonderful story, but we need the other half.
Unbeknownst to his girlfriend, Henrietta Hedgehog, the anteater was so busy eating ants that his girlfriend was feeling neglected. And she was like, hey, what about me? And she started talking to the patron saint of hedgehogs, Hedgehogian. Hedgehogian, my boyfriend is up there in the night sky, and I'm down here on the earth. It's not fair. I can see him, but I can't be near him. And Hedgehogian said, this must be corrected. And Hedgehogian blew the breath of breaths upon Henrietta Hedgehog, and she began to ascend into the night sky to join her boyfriend, Antony, the anteater.
Very well done, wonderful.
Did we lose my story, mate?
We lost your story, mate, but we got the whole story from you, so it's perfectly all right. Thank you very much. Did you enjoy making it?
Yes. It means the coffee has finally kicked in.
We have a very good time listening to your story. Thank you, Babasi. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
So, Claire, could you share the other constellation with us now so that people can see? And this is what John and Roisin are going to tell us a story about. So picture this in your minds when you listen to their story.
Okay. So I'll
You
start
start,
and then we'll just pass it backwards and
Yeah.
forwards like a ball.
Bit of a ping pong.
Bit of ping pong.
Okay, let's see, give me a second, please.
Yeah, I
Gallery.
love that to see, but it's
While
much.
John Rowe is composing, may I ask a question? Where are you, Despina and John Rowe, what part of the world are you in right now?
We're in Much Wenlock near the Welsh border in Shropshire,
Okay.
but we're on the English side.
On the English side, next to Mike Rust, who is the director of the Get a Word in Edgeways Festival and has kindly invited us here to be part of it.
Right.
So Karen, sorry, my love, we lost you, but Babasi gave us the whole story, so he's covered your part as well. It was a very nice story. Thank you. Did you enjoy the creative process, Karen? Great, great, great. So now John and Roisin are going to give us their story. Here you are, guys.
Well, this is a quite specific time in history, within a few hundred years. And a new pyramid had just been finished. And it had, besides the mummified pharaoh, it was full of gold and all the things for the pharaoh to take to the next world. Well, the pyramid had been built by poor people, and it was surrounded by poor people. And in the way of depressed areas, one of the respectful ways to make a living was thieving. And there was a house of thieves, and there were 3 master thieves inside. Now, I don't know why we always assume thieves are men.
That's
But,
true.
but in this case, they were.
Yeah.
There was some really good women thieves as well.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. In the interest of equality, etc. So, but these were free geezers.
They were pretty good.
And so they know this place is full of gold, and we know that historically grave robbing goes right back to the minute they finish, because you're surrounded by poor people and everyone knows it's full of gold. They're going to pop in and get some.
Absolutely.
And the plan is that they will get this gold and they would take it back to the house of thieves, where it be shared out, because it was kind of communal living. And so they were quite successful, weren't they?
They did very well.
They did very well. They managed to. But they were quite clever. They got themselves in the sort of slave bit where they're building it, and then but they'd left a brick sort of without,
Absolutely.
so it could just be slid out.
Yeah.
And they go in and they put, and there's 3 lots of swag, and they walk together. And if we remember that picture of that constellation, there's a star a little way away from the pyramid, and they walk together and then they have a bit of a discussion. Now, they think, well, they ostensibly thought that really it would be safer if we split into 3, and then one of us will get back, at least one will get back to share stuff out with the village. Now they're thieves. I mean, there is a certain amount of dodginess amongst us, but so do we think they're going to get back?
Well, this is the thing. You see, 2 out of the 3 of them were thinking, well, there's 3 of us. If I don't happen to get back with my nice bag of swag, would they be that worse off? Because there's another 2, and they'll share that, won't they? So 2 of them at least had no intentions of actually going back where they were supposed to go. So off they set, with these identical bags, all full of their gold and their treasure and their jewellery, and off they went, didn't they? And the first one, he was quite fast, wasn't he? He
Yeah.
set off at quite a lick, and he went up the track, and he followed until he'd spent a couple of nights out in the open. It was a bit chilly and a bit grumpy. So when he got to an inn, he thought, this would do me, didn't he? And he thought, I'll go in there and I can have a nice bath and I can have a good meal. And in he went. But thieves are not the only dodgy characters around, are they, John?
I have known a few dodgy landlords or establishments where hospitality could be found.
Well, and this was one of them, because, you know, when this man came into the inn, basically, the landlord spotted a big bag and he wondered what was in it. So he went up when the man had gone to his room, the wooden door, there was a little bit where it shrunk and there was a hole. And the landlord looked through that hole and he saw the thief slide in the bag of jewels and swag under the bed. So late that night, the landlord went in, knocked him on the head, dragged him out of bed, down the stairs, outside, into the well. And he went back and he took that bag of swag and he hid it for himself.
Now, 2 days later, because there was a bit difference in speed.
Yeah, the second one was much slower, John.
Much slower,
Mhm.
bigger bag of swag, isn't it? More.
Yeah.
And, so he gets the same in.
Yeah.
And well, we'd still be here tomorrow if we didn't say the same thing happened.
Absolutely.
So-
Spot on.
So spot on, straight down the well, landlord's got the swag.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the one who was more communally minded gets back to the house of thieves and distributes his wealth. Or as it is put, there's a redistribution of wealth going on.
Absolutely.
And so the wealth is redistributed round the house of thieves. And then he begins to wonder where his two mates now. He's quite an innocent. And I've done a lot of work in prisons, and there's a lot of innocents in there that have done some very dodgy stuff. And so there's and it doesn't occur to him that they didn't mean to come back, and he's worried about his two mates. And am I going to find them? And this is where the constellation comes in again.
Because he went outside the house of thieves and he was thinking, where on earth will I find them? And he looked up and he saw a constellation that had a pointed shape, and he thought, maybe, just maybe, that's pointing the direction I should go. And it's as good a direction as any to try, isn't it, John? So off he went. And he started walking and walking, and sure enough, he came to the inn. Now, he was a bit of an innocent, but he wasn't stupid, because he noticed the innkeeper's dog curled up on a couple of old discarded sacks. And the sacks were exactly the same as the one he'd taken back to the house of thieves. And he realised something dodgy was going on. And so he checked in, looked around, couldn't see anything. And he was so frustrated. Well, I know they've been here, but how, you know, if I ask the innkeeper, he's not going to go, yes, I've sort of got rid of them or anything. What am I going to do? And it was a beautiful, clear night, wasn't it, John? Beautiful.
Full of stars, full of stars.
Absolutely. And he went out and he was wandering about looking at the stars, and he stopped and he paused.
There was almost as many as if the antiques hadn't been up
That's
there.
very true. And you know what? He leant on a small wall that he found, and he leant up and he looked, and there was that constellation, and he thought, well, if you brought me this far, can you just give me a sign what I'm supposed to do next? But as he leant back, there was a largish pebble on the wall, and he dislodged it, and it fell because it was the wall of the well. And it went down, and suddenly, instead of going splash, it went, and a voice went, oi! And he looked down the well, and there, looking up at him, were two pretty bedraggled, quite skinny looking, hungry villains down the bottom of the well.
Well, he goes, he's thinking, how am I going to get them out? And how am I going to get rid of that? Because we need our swag back,
Absolutely,
because we went to all the trouble of nicking it,
absolutely.
Um,
High risk.
high risk. So, and the Pharaoh didn't need it. He
Absolutely
popped
not.
his clogs, and he'd had too much of our stuff in his lifetime anyway.
Quite right.
So-
Quite right.
So he's musing about all this, and then he asked the landlord a question. I can't remember what the question was.
He said, landlord, when I was outside in your yard, I could hear the songs of the stars. They were singing to me. And I could swear that there was a song coming back from deep in your well. How could that be? Well, the landlord panicked. He thought, oh no, what if one of those two villains I threw down the well wasn't actually dead yet? So he said, I'll come along with you, lad, and find out what's going on. That's a really interesting idea, singing stars. But he paused to pick up a boulder from by the door, and he stuck it under his shirt, and he went across, because what he was going to do, of course, is throw it down the well to finish anybody off that was down there. And he got as far as the edge of the well, and he put his ear in to go, now let's see if I can hear anything. And quick as a flash, the young thief shouted, look out! And he gave the landlord a shove. And the landlord, because of the weight of the rock, and he was going head first, landed on his head, and his neck went, ooh.
So he pulls his two friends out.
Yep.
They go back into the pub, the inn, and they reclaim everything they'd nicked.
Yep.
After a pint.
And well, they made themselves free with the hospitality of the
Yeah.
pub. And they went back to that. They went back, and they decided to stay together this time because it would be safer. And the innocent have persuaded them, and they're looking at him and think, well, he did say, you know, I mean, really,
Yeah.
really sort of honesty pays. Well, you know, I mean, within the meaning of the act. And, so they go back to the House of Thieves, and they're kind of, they realise that the whole village is a bit short of money. So they decide they turn the House of Thieves into a
caravanserai.
yeah. And the money they left over, obviously they distributed around the village. But it was, they didn't have to go out thieving anymore because they could make it, it was, the food was good.
Yeah. And they got a reputation that if you happen to be carrying a bit of swag or two, these were honest men who wouldn't actually try and take it away from you.
Yeah.
So they got even more customers.
Absolutely. And so people would recognise the place. They hung a sign outside that happened to be that constellation with the pyramid and the breaking up into different directions.
And they renamed the inn as the Stars Sing.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So and the profits from that went in to making, and that was the first republic in that area.
Yeah.
There was a later one on the edge of
The Ptolemies.
Morocco.
Oh, nice.
Saleh.
There was no republic.
No, Saleh was what? Yeah, there was for 40 years on the coast of Morocco, opposite the Rabat was a mere village, and the town was Saleh, and Saleh was a pirate republic for 40 years. Wow.
And now you know how it all started.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Wow, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And that is how you have storytellers create new stories. Lovely, isn't it? So with that, we're 5 minutes to time, so we're going to bid you farewell from the lovely town of Much Wenlock. It was very, very nice to be here with you and have you with us, all the way from Washington, D.C., 7 in the morning, my hero friend. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who took part in this. I hope you had a good time. I hope you liked it. What my suggestion would be, if you can make it, do come to Match Wenlock next year, because Get a Word in Edgeways is a very warm, friendly little festival that's really got great atmosphere. We had good audiences, very warm responses from the people. I think it was good for both sides, artists and audience. So with that, we bid you farewell.
And we thank Wally for flying the magic carpet for 4 hours.
And we couldn't have done it without you, Wally. Thanks for being here. And on time. That counts as well.
Wait, does this mean I can go back to bed?
Come again, Babasi?
Does this mean I can go back to bed?
You can go back to bed, my love. Yes, yes. And dream dreams of stars.
I'll be dreaming of anteaters. No!
Thanks, Claire, for all your help with the tech stuff and for taking part in this. And especially for giving us a story, half English, half Welsh. That was really interesting. Yeah, great. So thanks for being here, and hopefully see you next year. Big kiss. Big kiss to Morocco, big kiss to the World Storytelling Cafe and our friends there.
And if anyone wants
Yes.
to come and tell
Yes.
us, I think next Sunday
It's
at
story
6,
round.
it's the Worldwide Story Round run by Mike Russ at
great.
6 o'clock in the evening UK time. So everyone is welcome. Just come on the way you came onto this.
Yes, yes, exactly. The same link. Sunday, the
6 o'clock.
20th, that is, right? 6 p.m. UK time. Everybody's welcome. Mike is a very nice host, and everybody gets a chance to share a story there. So
And I can sleep.
back to sleep you go. Big kiss. Bye.
This has been fun. Thank you. It was worth getting up early.